Welcome all. My name is Michael Bistreich, known for the purposes of this podcast as Shadow Master. I'm your resident horror expert, having a long-standing history with the genre. I've written a thesis paper for my graduate degree in the forms and themes of horror films, invested in the creation of horror films, visited many different horror conventions, having met with the likes of Robert Englund, Nick Castle, John Carpenter, and a few others, picking up pieces of signed memorabilia, and have literally watched thousands of hours of horror films.
Hi, my name is Kyle Fallon, the Acolyte. I recognized two of those names. I have watched literal minutes of horror movies. I have been fascinated with the genre, but have no idea how I would get into it. So that's why I talked to my friend, an expert, to start the
Endarkened podcast. Today we'll be looking at a brilliant piece of Australian psychological horror enigmatically named You'll Never Find Me. The film is directed by Josiah Allen and Indiana Bell also having served as the film's writer. The lead actors are Brandon Rock, who plays Patrick, and Jordan Cowan, who plays a character we only get to know in the credits as the Visitor. Now, the film has an 81% critic score and 66% audience score on Rotten Tomatoes, which is automatically interesting to see for a horror film. I'll also note that the Shudder audience rated it a 3.8 out of 5. The Shudder audience is particularly important here because the film is exclusively distributed in North America by Shudder. One particular critic's write-up that I would like to discuss briefly is RogerEbert.com's Sheila O'Malley, who rated the film 4.5 out of 5 stars. I think she provides an excellent, intricate, and intelligent analysis. That being said, this is something that might be considered elevated or challenging horror. Definitely not your average slasher fare. Upon the film's opening, we're greeted with a menacing atmosphere. You can hear the wind screaming, almost like it's in either pain or rage. We can't quite tell which one yet. And the storm thunder sounds, as was pointed out to us by your brother while watching it, like a heartbeat.
Yeah, the storm is like definitely a major character, essentially, in this movie. The way it howls, it sounds like a person. It sounds like a person in agony more than it sounds like rain and thunder.
Definitely. And there's a bit of foreshadowing going on here, obviously. I also want to point out that the music choice is sleepwalking. So the film kind of starts us off with all these little hints and clues, but the fact that there is a storm that seems alive is definitely something we're going to come back to in the end. I also do want to point out how in the beginning and towards the middle of the film even, we don't quite know who to trust. The characters seem to both fear each other, and we as the audience go back and forth not knowing who's scarier, why they're scary, why the inconsistencies we seem to keep hearing are so unnerving.
Yeah, let's talk about the Visitor's inconsistencies.
Oh, yeah.
So, the Visitor, she comes in, knocks on Patrick's door in the middle of the night during this horrific rainstorm. And she tells him that she was at the beach, which is a little weird because it's supposed to be winter. And
it's a bit far.
And it's far, and the gate's locked. And she says that she came from work.
Mm-hmm.
Then she was visiting. She was on holiday.
And her home is somehow only a little far from here. Although, as Patrick says, everything's a little far from here.
It's strange. She keeps having a different story about herself.
Oh, yes. And I do appreciate that we as the audience are kind of given a moment or a pause to notice that each time she says it before Patrick directly brings it up.
She kind of sounds a little bit like everyone.
And that is a fun little lead into our next point. There seems to be a blurring of lines, so to speak. Everything that she says is inconsistent, but the film does not do this haphazardly. it's done for a very, very important reason. She'll make comments throughout the movie like, women like me, XYZ. She'll say things like, we all start to blend in. And Patrick even makes an allusion to the fact that many of the women he's known in the past just seem to be finding a place for the night.
But let's talk about Patrick's inconsistencies. He's a weird guy.
To say the least.
So he's living out in the middle of nowhere, where it seems like everyone's running. Everyone he lives there says they're running away from something. As it gets on, he admits he is running away from something. He's running away from his job for one reason. Oh, some reason. What was the reason, Mike?
Well, I believe that he tells us that after he almost died because he shoved a piece of metal into a live electric socket, nothing quite felt the same anymore. This man is a thrill seeker who could never get his thrills from his work anymore. He talks about how excitement and fear are kind of the same thing, and they're the only thing that really makes him feel alive.
Yeah, it seems that death is the only thing that can make him alive. Weird. Let's talk about his place a little bit, like his wall of trinkets.
Yes, and if you know anything about the culture that we're about to speak about in this film, you'll understand and start getting the clues a little easier. So people who are a little more aware of certain real life events might be able to pick up on these things. And I know that you have seen more of the real life stories than you've actually seen of horror films at this point.
Yeah.
But yeah, he has a lot of earrings in a pill bottle that she finds in the bathroom. There seem to be
necklaces.
There's a sweater with a woman's name on it.
Lockets of hair.
Yeah, things that originally are told to us merely to be remembrances of a lost girlfriend or even wife.
Vague. Intentionally vague. As the stories progressed, it definitely is pretty obvious what Patrick is and what those things are.
Yes, I do like how it's given to us slowly. I do like how if you know kind of thing. And just bringing us briefly back to the ambiance, the storm does rage more and more as we start to see these clues. Like it's getting angry. Like there is something higher that is unpleased with what's going on in this little man's trailer.
And what I've noticed, what my brother noticed, is that the storm, specifically the lightning, seems to be linked to the visitor. As she is more relaxed, the storm seems to calm down, the lightning seems to slow down. As she gets more nervous, more afraid, lightning picks up, lights start going out, things get darker and more chaotic.
Yes, and to bring us back to actually one of our points right from the start of the film, this entire process takes us through the going back and forth. As we see Patrick's trinkets that he can't really explain, or the woman's name who he can't really describe the stories behind, and we see her giving inconsistent stories, it leads us together with this ambiance and together with what we're seeing to still not really knowing who to trust. Although, as Kyle says, the more it goes on, you kind of know you shouldn't trust Patrick, but you still also kind of can't trust the visitor.
The visitor is definitely doing some unusual things. She seems to be trying to, throughout the movie, it seems like she's trying to kill him.
Indeed.
Especially once the power goes out, looking for the fuses, just grabbing a hammer.
Yes, grabbing a hammer, looking for a way out before there's even anything honestly that creepy going on yet. She seems to want to hit him with that hammer actually in the moment.
definitely done a lot of work to obfuscate who is trying to murder who.
Yes, and I think we can make a good point about that towards the end, although I will take us back to discussion of this idea of her being the every woman, and also back to some of Patrick's more in-depth monologuing commentary, which I think converge to give us some important ideas. For instance, when Patrick is at the sink, I think this is one of the most telltale scenes in the movie, because he seems to lose himself in that moment as the camera focuses exclusively on him, and we hear him talking about the fact that he is in a waking nightmare. He is living something that he cannot break free from. He says that as a child, all he could see in his dreams were cartoons and fun, bright, happy ideas. And now it's like everything is a nightmare, to the point where when he's asleep, when he's awake, are a mystery to him. He doesn't really know.
Yeah, he wishes he was new, like a baby.
All over again.
I like that scene as well, because he's cleaning dishes ominously. The sink fills up with tomato soup in a horrific fashion.
Yes.
There's a really good use of color in that scene.
We also get a little bit of a history on Patrick, a little bit at a time, where he talks about his mother essentially having abandoned him and his incapacitated father, who died. And we do get a sense that he may be a little bit blaming the mom. At least in the beginning, it only seems like it's a little bit.
The mother issues is fine. There's a lot of people, debates. It's fine.
The reason I bring this up is to bring these points together of saying that we have a man who is in a waking nightmare, lived a tragic youth where the most important woman in his life caused great amounts of trauma for him. And now we have a woman who seems to be every different woman at once in the world talking at the same time to him. And we get the clues about the trinkets. So you as our audience, I'm going to ask you to start thinking right now. And at the end, if you do not want to hear any spoilers, I'll just say stop listening now, because we will be talking in depth about the ending of the movie. But for an in-depth thought on the film, in-depth thought analysis on the film, keep listening.
Yeah. Okay. So they're probably gone at this point. So he's like a serial killer.
Yeah, pretty much. Exactly that. But she's still scary.
I think she felt like a serial killer. As I was going through the movie, I kind of thought they were both serial killers that just so happened to meet up at the same cabin at the same time.
Definitely a valid thought to have.
100% intentional. It's definitely an intentional decision by them to start it off as it starts getting creepier. And she's starting to do things around the trailer. Definitely giving off those vibes. The way she's seeing horrific visions, it feels like it's got some sort of psychological thing. As we find out,
it feels like they're both trying to kill each other because, spoiler alert, they are.
Oh.
One a little less literally than the other.
One of them technically already succeeded at it.
Yes. In one of Patrick's flashbacks, we do actually get to see the visitor. We're teased with it all along the film as we hear him listening to Sleepwalking in his car as a figure blurred out by a rainstorm is knocking on it. We only know that this figure is female. We do find out later that that figure is the visitor. a visitor representing the first of all his victims.
Yeah, she's definitely the first, and it definitely has to make sense why she would be the vision of like everything. So it's why he says like she looked familiar, but he couldn't put his finger on it. Like who she reminded him of, and it just shows like how many people he must have killed. Actually, you see how many people he must have killed
Yes.
at the end of the film. But
when they begin to populate the trailer in body bags or covered in blood.
Well, a little more further, but like coming back, as the
So yes, at the end of the film, we kind of see another side of Patrick, a side of Patrick that maybe isn't so okay with what went down in the course of his life. We do hear him originally say things like, the only thing that exists close to God's voice is that voice in the back of your head, or as some of us might call it, that still small voice. But that voice for Patrick, even though it is his own, seems to be getting louder and louder and louder, and it doesn't like what went down.
Yeah, a lot of the audio. I really like some of the audio design they did before this. Like some of Patrick's lines will sound like they're coming from his voice, but it will sound, some scenes will be where he's standing, like in relative. And sometimes he'll be speaking, it's literally, it's like it's in your head.
Yes. And it's actually made to sound ethereal, like it's a voice from on high.
Yeah.
Which is something that I appreciated about the film. We do see, again, as we continue to go through this, that the voice of a God that Patrick thinks does not exist is the very thing that ultimately will bring him to justice by his own hand. And that is the core of this film. A serial killer that has a crisis of conscience, even though he got away with it. You'll never find him, but he found himself.
Possibly no one found him. He might still be in that trailer rotting.
That is true. That is true. I do want to bring up briefly the fact that he does say that there are kids that knock on his door late at night, and he goes through a hallucinatory process where he seems to think that it's the police knocking on his door. So the kids, actually, this was one of your points, Kyle. They kind of might have driven him crazy.
Those kids might have stopped serial killer by being dickheads.
Oh, I like it. I like the viewpoint.
just annoying their neighbors at like 1 o'clock in the morning by slamming on their door. It's made him think that the shoe finally dropped after all this time in there. The shoe finally dropped. The cops are showing up. They're gonna kill me.
And I forgot to mention this before, but it doesn't help that he's clearly recently relapsed. There is a dead body in the trailer.
We don't know if he's relapsed or if this is just his latest victim. It doesn't.
That's a good point too. That's a good point too.
Seem like he's the kind of person to stop. He's so enthusiastic with "they'll never find me."
I do think that's a valid viewpoint. I do also think it's worth mulling over the idea that, eventually he got so bored living there that he went back to his old ways, and that's what brought the fear back to him too.
It's both are probably very good, like, I think valid viewpoints on like that. If it was just the most recent victim and that was just the one that sent him over the edge, or if it was just he had stopped for a while living out in this trailer park in the middle of nowhere and just finally snapping and doing it again. I was like, well, you know what?
Yeah. So, I mean, I highly recommend this film. I haven't really seen anything explore a topic quite like this of purely a serial killer's conscience getting to him as we watch him through that process and not even knowing if his victims are in fact the ones putting him in danger.
They are kind of killing him. As like sort of like his past is catching up to him, and he's finally succumbing to his own decisions. The consequences of his own actions.
And he realizes it when he takes the empty vial of poison out of his pocket and just starts laughing. He knows, I got myself.
He's really happy about that, honestly.
I mean, it is a release for him. He clearly did not feel well about what he did. And, of course, this is the ending that a man like this deserves. But at least he knows that.
It's honestly, like, anticlimactic because of it. Like he was probably hoping that he'd get caught.
That's a fair criticism because, again, the film does work off of a lot of what we know about serial killers. And most of the time, or at least a very large chunk of it, they're egomaniacal. So perhaps he's... And with that, thank you for joining us on the inaugural episode of the Endarkened podcast. This has been your host, Shadow Master, and we look forward to seeing you in the future as we plunge ever deeper into the dark depths of the human soul.
I have been the Acolyte, and I hope you will join us again soon on our next episode.
The Endarkened podcast. Got a break there.